Pano Canelos announced on Barry Weiss's Substack that they were helping co-found the University of Austin that would be devoted to truth and freedom. Now, there are good and not so good things about this, so let's look at both. Higher education has been a dumpster fire for a while. This has been more true in the humanities than natural sciences, and while you might think that that's like a better thing, it's actually the worst scenario. And that's because the humanities, by their very nature, are closer to human nature and are thus more important. It's better to have a vitiated physics than ethics. By humanities being dumpster fires, I mean humanities departments as a whole. There are many wonderful professors in the humanities departments, but very few departments as a whole are of reliably high quality. Okay, so first the good things about the University of Austin. First, finances. UATX, that's the abbreviation for the university, is going to have a new financial model that completely rethinks how a university operates by developing a novel financial model. They say, we will lower tuition by avoiding costly administrative excess and overreach. We will focus our resources intensively on academics rather than amenities, and we will align institutional incentives with student outcomes. And that's all great. College is perhaps the most inflated product in US history. The cost has gone up and its value has gone down. Now, I know these are well-worn paths, but the data is staggering, and it's not just the cost that's bad. Check this out. The average cost of college in the United States is $35,000 per student per year. The cost has tripled in 20 years. In the school year of 1963 to 64, tuition and fees, no, not including room and board, was $8,600. This current year was $33,000. And why is this? Alex Tarabek and Eric Helland explain on Marginal Revolution that the explanation for the astronomical increase in college costs turns out to be simple. We are paying teachers and staff and faculty more in real terms, and we've hired more of them. But it gets worse. It's not just that college has gotten more expensive, the financing has fundamentally changed. MarketWatch noted that a student making a part-time minimum wage salary could pay 106% of University of Central Florida's costs in 1987, while an equivalent job would cover 68% in 2016. And that's for a public institution. If you take a standard income distribution, college costs have risen so high that they've moved out from the center of the distribution, that is where most people's income is, and into the tails. And this would be fine if fewer people were going to college, but unfortunately the number of people attending college has steadily increased from around 5% of the population in 1940 to around 37% in 2019. So if college costs are astronomically high but people can't afford it, then how is it being financed? Well, debt. And it gets worse. There are scary similarities to this and the housing bubble. But this debt is in certain ways worse than the housing debt. If the housing loans were subprime, student loans are super subprime, because with student loans, you need no collateral, no job, and you can't declare bankruptcy on them. Both housing and education are propped up on easy-to-get government loans. Okay, but just because you spend more money on something, even if you're borrowing it, doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, provided that the thing that you're spending money on is getting better. And once again, it gets worse. Now, I know that income is not the only marker or even the most important marker for the value of education, but it is an important one, and we'll get to the other markers. In short, the market value of a college degree has plummeted. Over the past couple of years, some of the most successful companies have removed a college degree for employment. This includes Apple, Google, IBM, Costco, Penguin, Whole Foods, Hilton, and Starbucks. That is, the market no longer believes that a college degree is valuable preparation for employment. And not only are the job procurement prospects bad, but the earnings are poor. The average adjusted starting salary for a college graduate in 1963 was more than the average starting salary in 2015. Ergo, dumpster fire. So it's wonderful that the UATX recognizes this problem and is adopting measures to combat it. Okay, but all you good liberal arts enthusiasts, of which I count myself a member, are probably thinking, yeah, income has little to do with the value of an education. A liberal education is about forming you into a free person, teaching you how to think, and how to think is valuable in every vocation. Which brings me to the second good feature of the University of Austin, objectivity. When I was in higher education a decade ago, soft relativism was well on its way to consuming colleges. This slowly but steadily morphed into the hideous creature that now haunts the halls of higher education. What started as inclusion of diverse voices has developed into a dogmatic ontology where all of reality is filtered through groups with differing levels of power and wielding it as oppression. And these groups are identified with scholastic certainty and deterministic structure as race, sex, and class. The great and mournful error in this is the separation of the student from the object of inquiry. That is, because every poem, every play, every law of logic, every law of the state must be mashed through the sieve of power class struggles, the nature of the poem, its points, its premises, its particular concerns are ignored at best or transmogrified into a foreign and ugly object at worst. That is, the thing that you are studying, its thing is lost, its thingness, its particularity. And ironically, while the proponents of this kind of education would claim to be on the side of diversity, it is they who flatten and force the object through their image of reality. The original task of education was to unfold the truth, beauty, and goodness, the nature of the object of inquiry, the tempest, a painting of Turner, or a mathematical theorem. And the substance of that education is whatever the object has for us. John Ellis, in his book Literature Lost: Social Agendas and the Corruption of the Humanities, describes this disease as follows. In this grim view of humanity, one central factor displaces and undermines the multiplicity of other motivations that we used to think so important. Love, loyalty, fulfillment, ambition, achievement, friendship, intellectual curiosity, and so on. But the current crop of educational denizens require that Pythagoras and Protagoras have at least an implicit view of race or sex. It is inconceivable to these intellectuals that one might just be interested in math. We need to let the mathematician gush over Gödel, and Gödel alone. The world is a multiplicity of things, and she must speak in her own tongue and time and timbre. The truth of the object of the world is the object of education, and it is the truth of the object that is lost in higher education, which is why it is wonderful to read on the front page of the UATX website. We're building a university dedicated to the fearless pursuit of truth. And in their principles, they say, universities devoted to the unfettered pursuit of truth are the cornerstone of a free and flourishing democratic society. This is wonderful and true. But now we move to the not so great things. And the first one is an incomplete view of freedom. One of the most repeated themes of the University of Austin is its commitment to freedom. But it's clear that what they mean by freedom is a negative freedom. That is, a freedom from something, a lack of constraints. And this is a good thing, or more properly, it's half a good thing. The traditional understanding of freedom is that it is both negative and positive. Freedom from certain things and freedom for others. And both are equally important. This twofold view of freedom can be traced back to Augustine, and I think, of course, it can be traced back to Genesis. But it finds modern expression in Kant and Isaiah Berlin's two concepts of liberty. And what's wrong with simply a negative view of freedom is two things. First, it has disastrous consequences, and second, it's self-referentially contradicting. First, the consequences. David Bentley Hart tells a story of when he was teaching at the University of Virginia and a student committed suicide. It was then discovered that his friends knew that the young man was going to commit suicide and did nothing about it.
Not only were some of them aware that he intended to kill himself, but that they had made no effort to prevent him from doing so. And when asked why, they said, well, it was his choice. We had to respect his choice. That was the way he chose to go. The question that story raised for me then and does now is, at what point did it become plausible for not one but 3 or 4 reasonably bright young men simply to stand aside and allow a friend of theirs kill himself on the grounds that his choice was to kill himself, and that there's no higher value or no greater concern that should be invoked.
Locating negative freedom as the highest freedom results in things that strike us as not just wrong, but in some way not free. Simple, unconstrained choice is just as much an enslavement as shackles. And this is a perpetual problem of conservatives, of which I count myself a part. Every time someone is canceled, the complaint is based on freedom. But what happens when a conservative wants to cancel someone, say an ISIS jihadist or a pederast? No one believes in absolute freedom, and everyone believes that some people should be canceled. The argument is not between freedom and non-freedom, but between worldviews. What should and should not be canceled and why. But not only does this view of freedom produce horrendous consequences when taken to its logical ends, but no one actually believes it. And we know this because there are internal contradictions with the contents of the theory and the actions of those who purport to hold it. You see, every action you take is a constraint. Take, for example, the University of Austin website. They chose a set of typefaces, which constrained how the visitors to the website must see it. They chose the courses they're offering, the professors, and they'll choose the books. But if the entirety of freedom is defined negatively, then all these decisions are problematic because in the very quest to create an institution to inculcate freedom, freedom is limited. But freedom is not simply lack of constraint, but a lack of certain types of constraint coupled with positive freedom. Let's take architecture as an example. When you're designing a building, you first talk to the owner and determine the purpose, the teleology of the building. Then you design the building to maximally meet that end, that purpose. But notice, one's physical and social freedom is not necessarily hindered by walls and rooms. Nay, when done properly, the freedom is enhanced. So walls could actually help with fortuitous fellowship, lighting to illumine the faces, wayfinding to peacefully move you through the building. These things are constraints, but liberal constraints, constraints that free and aid in the perfecting of the nature of the occupants. The second not great thing is the thin worldview. When you peruse the University of Austin website, there's not much that they intend to teach. They intend to pursue truth, but you wonder what truth? They're committed to freedom of inquiry, freedom of conscience, and civil discourse, but those are preliminaries. What's the pie? Now at this point, you might be mumbling that overwrought aphorism that education is not about teaching you what to think, but how to think. Obviously, it's both, and everyone believes that. No professor who would believe that dictum would be happy if a student left the university saying, "They really taught me how to think, and I'm still a racist." Yes, I'm sure the detractor would say that there must be some error in their logic, but it seems at least as plausible to me to say that there's an error in their knowledge, like they're not believing that all men are created equal, or better yet, that they were created in the image of God. And what about the primitive propositions that you believe and don't even think about, like your memory is not an illusion, or the external world is real, or force equals mass times acceleration? Furthermore, the distinction between content and method is not as obvious as it may seem. Like the law of non-contradiction, A cannot be both A and not A at the same time and in the same sense. Is that content or method? Well, it's both. And this idea also reeks of a scientism that supposes that the proper method will certainly secure truth. If we have the right order of operations, then that'll just discover all truth for us, and we wouldn't need any commitment or disposition of the will. We wouldn't need a second nature, habituation of the soul and virtue. We wouldn't need a skillful crafting of attention. You see, what experiment we should do next, you don't just read that off of the previous experiment. You need something else. The university was the production of the medieval church, designed to teach both the true account of the world and the means to continue that quest. The University of Austin's website declares their pursuit of truth, but it's lacking its acquisition. They shouldn't just pursue it, but they should actually procure it. Education is the handing on of the faith once delivered to the saints, a determinate but ever-growing deposit. So, in conclusion, you can analyze everything from a de facto and a de jure perspective. From the former, I'm happy that the University of Austin exists. It's certainly an improvement on many, if not most, universities. De jure-wise, it is lacking the animating principle of the university at its origin: God creating, man falling, and Christ redeeming. Thank you guys for checking out the video this week. I really do appreciate it. I'd love to hear what you think. I've been thinking about college for a very long time, and this University of Austin sort of gave me the chance to kind of put this all in one place. And so I would love to hear what y'all think. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/thebibleisart. You can go to the website if you'd like to be notified whenever I put out another video, thebibleisart.com. You can email me, blah, 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 blah. It's good to see you. Bye.